Introduction. The unspoken truth of exploitation in relationships. There's a profound and often unspoken tragedy that unfolds in the lives of many women, a truth that emerges not with fanfare, but through the quiet erosion of their spirit. It's the realization that not every man who professes love is there to build a life with you. Some are there to take your time, your energy, your emotional resources, and even your sense of self. These men don't announce their intentions with a megaphone. They don't wear signs that say, "I'm here to exploit you." No, their actions speak in whispers, cloaked in the guise of love, attention, or charm, until the damage is done, and the woman is left questioning her own worth. I'm here to lay bare this painful reality, to dissect it with the precision of a surgeon, because understanding these dynamics isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about reclaiming your sovereignty as a human being. When a man is using a woman, his behavior isn't random or accidental. It follows a pattern, a set of 5 undeniable behaviors that reveal his true intentions. These aren't mere quirks or flaws. They are deliberate strategies, rooted in a transactional mindset that sees relationships not as sacred partnerships, but as opportunities for personal gain. Over the next 30,000 words, I'll walk you through each of these behaviors, peeling back the layers of manipulation, control, and emotional neglect to expose the truth beneath. This isn't just a warning, it's a call to arms for every woman to recognize her value and demand nothing less than authentic reciprocal love. Behavior. 1. The transactional mindset. Love as a currency. Let's begin with the foundation of exploitation, the transactional mindset. When a man is using a woman, he doesn't see the relationship as a mutual endeavor, a shared journey toward growth and fulfillment. Instead, he views it as a ledger, a balance sheet, where every act of love, care, or attention is a currency to be exchanged for something he desires. This isn't love in the classical sense, love as a voluntary commitment to another's flourishing. No, this is a calculated give and take, a model where the primary question isn't, how can I contribute to this relationship? But what can I extract from it? You'll see this mindset manifest in subtle but telling ways. Imagine a man who listens to his partner, not out of genuine interest, but with a selective ear tuned only to what benefits him. If she's speaking about something deeply meaningful to her, perhaps a dream she's nurtured for years or a fear that keeps her up at night, he'll drift. His eyes glaze over, or he changes the subject entirely, redirecting the conversation to something that serves his interests. But the moment she mentions something he can leverage, say, an opportunity for him to gain social status, financial support, or physical intimacy, he's all ears, nodding with feigned empathy, agreeing, just enough to move the needle in his favor. This selective listening isn't a mere lapse in attention. It's a symptom of a deeper pathology. Emotional reciprocity, the cornerstone of any healthy relationship, is utterly absent. He's not building a bridge into her world, not seeking to understand her inner landscape. Instead, he's keeping the spotlight firmly on himself, ensuring that her presence in his life remains conditional, valuable only as long as it serves a function. Her emotions, her dreams, her very existence become tools in his arsenal, means to an end rather than ends in themselves. This transactional pattern extends to physical intimacy as well, where the lack of emotional depth becomes painfully clear. On the surface, he might seem affectionate, frequent touches, embraces, moments of closeness. But look closer, and you'll see the hollowness beneath. There's no tenderness, no attention to her emotional safety or connection. Physical closeness isn't an expression of love. It's a tool, a way to reset tension, to avoid deeper conversations, or to keep her emotionally entangled. If affection is only given when she complies, when she agrees with him, forgives his transgressions or meets his demands, it's not love, it's manipulation, cloaked in the performance of desire. Consider a scenario. A woman comes home after a grueling day, seeking comfort, a moment of genuine connection. She reaches for him, hoping for a hug, a kind word, something to anchor her in her vulnerability. But unless she's offering something in return, whether it's emotional validation, physical intimacy, or some other currency he values. She's met with distance. He pulls away, irritation flickering across his face, or worse, he goes silent, leaving her to grapple with her own unmet needs. Her need for affection becomes a burden, while his needs are treated as expectations she must fulfill without question. TWar. Practical terms. This man rarely shows up unless there's something in it for him. He's more than happy to let her cook for him, support his dreams, make sacrifices, or even subsidize parts of his lifestyle. But when the roles are reversed, when she needs something real, be it emotional support, practical help, or simply his presence, his calendar mysteriously fills up, his energy wanes, or he accuses her of being needy, ungrateful, or overly demanding. The imbalance is stark. Her needs are burdens, while his are non-negotiable. Over time, this transactional dynamic takes a devastating toll. The woman finds herself negotiating for the bare minimum: respect, consistency, consideration, things that should be the natural components of love. He might demand appreciation for the smallest gestures, highlighting how much he's done for her, not because he cares about her well-being, but because he's maintaining the appearance of being a good partner without embodying the reality. This erodes her sense of security, leaving her to feel that her value lies not in who she is, but in what she provides. She begins to withhold her own needs, suppress her voice, and shape herself around his moods, all in a desperate bid to earn the connection she craves. This is the tragic outcome of a transactional mindset, the slow death of authenticity, replaced by performance and compliance. Love, in its truest form, is not transactional. It's not a series of exchanges or trades. It's a voluntary commitment to someone else's flourishing, a choice to see their growth and happiness as intertwined with your own. When a man sees a woman as merely a provider of benefits, emotional, physical, financial, or otherwise, he's not in love with her. He's using her. And unless that core belief changes, no amount of charm or empty promises will alter the fundamental truth of his exploitation. Behavior. 2. Emotional manipulation, the quiet theft of the soul. The second behavior that reveals a man's exploitative intentions is emotional manipulation, an insidious tactic that operates in the shadows, slipping through the cracks of conversation and gradually weakening a woman's sense of self. This isn't manipulation in the overt cinematic sense. No shouting, no threats, no raised fists. It's far more subtle, far more corrosive, because it turns her emotions into tools for his advantage, eroding her internal compass until she no longer trusts her own perceptions. Emotional manipulation begins with small, seemingly harmless comments, the kind that might be dismissed as quirks in the early stages of a relationship. He might make a joke at her expense, a cutting remark about her appearance or intelligence, delivered with a smile that makes her question whether she's overreacting. When she expresses hurt, he doesn't apologize or reflect. Instead, he accuses her of being too sensitive, too emotional, too dramatic. "I was just kidding," he says, his tone dripping with condescension. "You need to lighten up." This, framing his criticism as honesty, her reaction as overreaction, is a deliberate tactic to keep her off balance. Over time, this pattern escalates. He rarely affirms her, but he's quick to point out her flaws, especially in moments when she's feeling good about herself. If she shares a success, a promotion at work, a personal milestone, a moment of pride, he finds a way to dampen it. Perhaps he compares her achievement to someone else's, subtly implying she's not good enough, or he shows outright disinterest, changing the subject to something about himself. This isn't accidental. It's a calculated move to keep her emotionally unstable, to ensure she never feels too secure, too confident, too independent. Guilt becomes another weapon in his arsenal. When she expresses discomfort or tries to set a boundary, say asking him to be more present or to stop dismissing her feelings, he doesn't engage with her concerns. Instead, he flips the script, positioning himself as the victim. "After everything I've done for you," he might say, his voice heavy with accusation, "you're still not happy?" Or, You're always trying to start a fight. Why can't you just be grateful? The goal isn't to understand her perspective. It's to shut it down, to make her feel selfish or ungrateful for daring to voice her needs. By shifting blame, he protects his ego while placing the burden of emotional labor squarely on her shoulders. Silence is another tool of manipulation, but not the reflective silence of someone processing their thoughts. This is punitive silence, designed to punish and control. When she brings up something difficult, perhaps his lack of effort, his dismissive attitude, or a broken promise, he withdraws. He goes cold, ignoring her texts, withholding affection, acting distant and dismissive. This emotional withholding creates anxiety, conditioning her to associate honesty or confrontation with abandonment. Over time, she learns to silence herself, to keep the peace, trading her truth for his temporary approval. He also uses validation strategically, offering praise or affection only when it serves his interests. If she caters to him, agrees with his opinions, or forgives him quickly after he's hurt her, he becomes warm and attentive again, showering her with just enough affection to keep her hooked. But if she challenges him, asserts her needs, or steps out of the role he's assigned her, that warmth disappears, replaced by coldness or criticism. This creates a pattern where her emotional needs are only met when she complies, turning her love into a performance rather than a partnership. She begins to anticipate his reactions, adjusting her behavior not because it feels right, but because it feels necessary for survival. Jealousy and control are also disguised as concern in this dynamic. He might question her friendships, monitor her social media, or imply that other men's attention is dangerous or disrespectful. "I just don't trust that guy," he might say, framing his suspicion as protectiveness. But this isn't about care. It's about containment. He doesn't trust her, not because she's untrustworthy, but because his own insecurity drives him to control her. He makes her second-guess harmless interactions, shrinking her world while his control grows stronger, all under the guise of love or concern. What makes emotional manipulation so devastating is its ability to erode a woman's internal compass. She starts to believe her feelings are exaggerated, her boundaries are selfish, her instincts are wrong. She might even feel lucky to have him, despite the emotional confusion he creates, because he's sown enough doubt in her mind that she no longer trusts herself. This is the essence of manipulation. Not the domination of the body, but the quiet theft of the soul's authority. He doesn't need to raise his voice or use threats. He just needs to make her doubt her own reality, ensuring she defers to him in every way that matters. Behavior. 3. Lack of long-term investment. A. Future denied. The third behavior that signals a man is using a woman is his lack of long-term investment in the relationship. When a man truly loves a woman, he builds toward a future with her. He lays down foundations, makes space for her in his long-term thinking, and moves with intention to create a shared life. But a man who is using a woman doesn't build, he consumes. He exists in the present, reaping the benefits of the connection without ever committing to its future, leaving her in a state of emotional limbo where hope becomes a trap. This lack of investment doesn't always look like overt avoidance. Sometimes, he'll offer just enough to give the illusion of a future together, vague promises of someday or when the time is right. He might say, "I can see us getting married one day," or "let's move in together when things settle down." But these words never translate into consistent actions. They remain empty promises, designed to pacify her growing concerns and keep her invested while he continues to benefit from the relationship without offering anything substantial in return. When she tries to have serious conversations about commitment, about marriage, cohabitation, or long-term planning, he evades. He might claim that now isn't the right time, that he needs to focus on himself, or that he's not ready yet. He frames this hesitation as self-awareness or maturity, but in reality it's a delay tactic. He knows that by feeding her just enough hope, she'll stay, waiting for him to be ready, waiting for clarity, waiting for a relationship that will never materialize in the way she dreams. This lack of investment is reflected in his behavior around major life decisions. When she talks about her future, her career goals, her dreams of starting a family, her desire for stability, he disengages. He might dismiss her aspirations, subtly mock them, or suggest they're unrealistic. "Do you really think you can pull that off?" he might say, his tone laced with skepticism. The key here is that he doesn't want to align his path with hers. He's not thinking in terms of partnership or shared progress. He's thinking about convenience, freedom, and short-term gratification. Her future isn't his concern, because deep down he doesn't see her as a permanent part of his life. You'll also notice his reluctance to integrate her into the deeper circles of his world. She might realize she hasn't met his close friends or family, or if she has, those introductions were casual, quick, and lacked sincerity. He keeps her at arm's length, never allowing her to feel like she truly belongs. If they've been together for a significant amount of time and she's still treated like a visitor rather than a partner, that's not oversight. It's intentional. He's preserving a sense of separation, ensuring he can detach without consequence. When the time comes, financial and practical decisions reveal the same pattern. He avoids shared responsibilities, refusing to discuss long-term planning around money, housing, or mutual goals. If she offers help, perhaps lending him money, supporting him through a tough time, or investing her energy in his dreams, he's happy to accept. But he won't reciprocate, won't engage in a joint vision, won't offer anything sustainable in return. The relationship becomes a one-sided investment, where she's pouring in effort and emotion with the hope of building something meaningful. While he treats it like a temporary arrangement, this lack of commitment slowly undermines her emotional stability. She starts questioning herself, whether she's asking for too much, whether she's too intense, whether she should be more patient. But in a healthy relationship, the future isn't a forbidden topic. It's a natural part of emotional growth. When a man truly cares, he moves with intention, making space for her in his long-term thinking. When that intention is missing, it doesn't matter how often he says, "I love you." Love without direction becomes a trap, leaving her hoping, waiting, and eventually breaking under the weight of her own unmet expectations. Behavior. Selective presence. The art of conditional involvement. The fourth behavior that reveals a man's exploitative intentions is selective presence. A man who is using a woman doesn't show up consistently, not emotionally, not practically, not even physically. His involvement is conditional, tied to convenience, mood, or self-interest, creating a relationship that feels unstable, unpredictable, and deeply disorienting. She's left constantly wondering where she stands, unsure if she can rely on him at all. At the beginning of the relationship, he might seem attentive, charming, and fully present. He's there with flowers, compliments, long conversations late into the night, everything a woman might dream of. But this effort fades once he feels he's secured her affection. After that, his presence becomes sporadic, inconsistent, a series of disappearances and reappearances that leave her emotionally dizzy. He might vanish for days or weeks, physically, emotionally, or through silence, only to return when he needs something: comfort, validation, physical intimacy, or some other form of support. These comebacks are often framed with shallow apologies or justifications. "I've been so busy," he might say, or "I just needed some space." But he never explains or reflects on his absence. Instead, he deflects, steering attention away from his behavior and back onto her. If she tries to express concern, to ask why he keeps disappearing, he minimizes her feelings. "You're overreacting," he says, or "You're being too needy." This gaslighting creates a dynamic where she begins to suppress her own emotional needs, fearing that asking for consistent connection will push him further away. In moments of her vulnerability, when she's dealing with stress, illness, disappointment, or emotional pain, he's rarely, if ever, available. She might call him, hoping for a listening ear, a shoulder to lean on, but he's nowhere to be found. He ignores her calls, gives vague excuses about being too busy, or worse, becomes annoyed, framing her distress as drama or emotional instability. These absences are revealing. A man who is using a woman isn't concerned with offering support unless there's something in it for him. Her emotional state is irrelevant if it doesn't affect his comfort or advantage. This selective presence also plays out in public settings. He might avoid being seen with her in certain contexts, keeping their relationship ambiguous around others. He picks and chooses when and how she's visible in his life, maintaining control of the narrative and keeping his options open. If she pushes for clarity, asking why he's so inconsistent, why he won't commit to plans, he responds with vague language. Let's just go with the flow, or why do we need to label things? His presence is intentionally non-committal, designed to avoid responsibility while keeping her close enough to meet his needs. He also uses timing to his advantage, reaching out only when it suits him, late at night after long silences, or when other plans have fallen through. These patterns aren't accidental. They reflect a deep lack of respect for her time, energy, and emotional availability. What's worse, when he does show up, he might be temporarily charming, affectionate, and attentive, just enough to reignite hope and keep her emotionally invested. These brief moments of attention are emotional bait, keeping her locked in a cycle of waiting, forgiving, and hoping. She begins to live on emotional breadcrumbs, holding on to the good moments while excusing the long gaps of neglect. Her standards slowly erode as she tries to make sense of his inconsistent behavior, often blaming herself for the disconnection. She might convince herself that if she just does things differently, stays quieter, becomes more agreeable, asks for less, he'll become more present. But deep down, she senses the truth. He's not unreliable by accident. He's showing up when it serves him and disappearing when it doesn't. His presence isn't a reflection of love. It's a strategy of use designed to keep her tethered without ever giving her the stability she deserves. Behavior. 5. Disregard for her growth. The threat of her evolution. The fifth and final behavior that signals a man is using a woman is his disregard for her growth. This isn't always overt. There are no dramatic attacks or direct discouragement, but it's insidious in its subtlety, manifesting as indifference, dismissiveness, or passive resistance to her progress. A man who truly loves a woman celebrates her growth, encourages her to expand, improve, and chase her ambitions. But a man who is using her sees her growth as a threat, because a woman who evolves becomes harder to manipulate, harder to control, and harder to keep in a relationship that serves only one side. At first, he might show mild interest in her goals or passions, especially if it helps him win her over in the early stages of the relationship. He might nod along as she talks about her dreams, offering surface-level encouragement to seem supportive. But that support fades once it becomes clear that her growth requires time, energy, and boundaries, things that interfere with his ability to keep her focused on him. When she starts investing in herself, her career, her education, her personal development, he becomes distant, critical, or sarcastic. "You've changed," he might say, his tone heavy with accusation, or, "You're so busy these days." These aren't observations. They're criticisms designed to make her feel guilty for focusing on herself. When she shares her dreams, he doesn't listen with real interest. He might nod, but there are no follow-up questions, no offers of help, no celebration of her milestones. If she achieves something meaningful, a promotion, a personal goal, a step toward her vision, he downplays it, ignores it, or shifts the attention back to himself. Her victories are met with silence or resentment rather than pride. Instead of being a partner in her evolution, he becomes an invisible anchor, pulling her back to keep her within the confines of his control. He might also undermine her subtly, questioning whether her goals are realistic or worth pursuing. If she's starting a new business, going back to school, or pushing herself into unfamiliar territory, he focuses on the risks, the sacrifices, or the inconveniences it causes him. "Are you sure you can handle that?" he might ask, framing his skepticism as concern. But his real discomfort lies in the possibility of her outgrowing him. A man who is using a woman doesn't want her to rise because rising means she might see the relationship for what it is: lopsided, unfulfilling, and rooted in dependence rather than mutual respect. As she claims more of her identity outside, the relationship he often becomes more controlling. He might question who she's spending time with, how she's dressing, or why she's investing in certain activities. These questions aren't about care or connection, they're about containment. He senses that her autonomy threatens the control he's quietly held over her, and he attempts to reassert himself by creating tension, guilt, or confusion. He might accuse her of drifting away or not being supportive, flipping the narrative so that her self-development looks like selfishness. In many cases, he simply checks out. He stops participating in conversations about her dreams, shows no interest in her growth, and offers nothing of his own. The relationship becomes stagnant, not because she isn't trying, but because he refuses to meet her in that effort. She begins to feel isolated in her aspirations, like she has to choose between becoming who she's meant to be and keeping the relationship intact. This is a false choice, but one that manipulation makes feel real. The most painful part is that she may still seek his validation. She wants him to be proud of her, to recognize her hard work, to walk beside her in the process. But deep down, she starts to realize that he isn't celebrating her growth because he never wanted her to grow in the first place. Her progress doesn't serve his interests. It challenges them. In a relationship built on use, not love, anything that empowers her becomes a threat, not a joy. The refusal to take accountability. The glue that binds exploitation. Underpinning all these behaviors is a final pervasive trait, a refusal to take accountability. A man who is using a woman avoids responsibility for his actions at all costs, minimizing the impact of his behavior and redirecting blame whenever possible. He lives in a world where everything that goes wrong in the relationship is someone else's fault, usually hers. Even when confronted with clear evidence of wrongdoing, he twists the narrative, denies the facts, or responds with anger or deflection, ensuring the truth remains negotiable in his hands. When she brings up concerns about his dismissive attitude, his lack of presence, his hurtful words, his first response is rarely reflection. Instead, he defends, deflects, or dismisses. "You're too sensitive," he might say, or "You're making a big deal out of nothing." These aren't just casual statements. They're calculated efforts to make her question her own perception of reality. He doesn't try to understand where she's coming from. He tries to make her feel irrational for bringing it up. Over time, she begins to doubt herself, wondering if she's overreacting, if she's being unfair, when in truth, she's simply asking for decency. Gaslighting is central to this refusal of accountability. He rewrites history to protect his image. If he promised something and didn't follow through, he'll claim he never said it. If he behaved in a disrespectful or hurtful way, he'll accuse her of misinterpreting or exaggerating. He shifts the conversation from what he did to how she responded, suggesting that her emotional reaction is the real problem, not his behavior. This emotional bait and switch is exhausting, leaving her to carry not only the pain of the original issue, but the confusion and guilt of being made to feel like she caused it. He also uses anger and intimidation as shields against accountability. When cornered by facts or confronted with consequences, he might raise his voice, shut down the conversation, or storm out entirely. These reactions aren't just expressions of frustration, they're tactics to avoid responsibility. By escalating the situation, he creates an environment where she feels unsafe or unwilling to push further. She starts to censor herself, not because her concerns aren't valid, but because the emotional cost of bringing them up is too high. In some cases, he plays the victim to escape accountability, bringing up his own struggles, his past, his stress, his emotional wounds, as explanations for his behavior. While vulnerability can be authentic, in this context it's manipulative. He uses his suffering as a shield against critique, shifting the focus away from her hurt and centering himself once again. Any attempt she makes to address the harm he's caused is met with stories of how hard life has been for him, how misunderstood he feels, how much pressure he's under. This allows him to dodge responsibility without appearing cruel or indifferent. Even when he does admit fault, it's surface level and short-lived. He might say, "Sorry," but his behavior doesn't change. The apology is performative, not transformative. a tool to reset the emotional balance temporarily rather than address the deeper issue or repair the damage done. She might cling to these apologies, hoping they signal growth or remorse, but over time, the pattern becomes clear. The words mean nothing if the actions remain the same. A relationship with no accountability slowly chips away at a woman's sense of truth. She's forced to constantly justify her feelings, carry the weight of his actions, and shrink her expectations to avoid conflict. His refusal to own his behavior isn't just a flaw, it's a strategy, one that keeps her disoriented, silent, and easier to use. Conclusion: reclaiming your sovereignty. A relationship built on use is not a relationship at all. It's a transaction cloaked in illusion. When a man shows no accountability, no investment, no presence, no support for her growth, and only seeks what benefits him, he's not loving a woman. He's consuming her. And the cost of staying in that dynamic is always paid by her, in self-worth, time, and emotional peace. Real love moves with clarity, with responsibility, with presence, and with respect. It's a commitment to mutual flourishing, a partnership where both parties grow, evolve, and support each other's highest potential. Anything less is not love, it's exploitation with good manners, and every woman deserves to know the difference before she's left carrying the weight of someone else's emptiness. So to every woman reading this, recognize your value. You are not a resource to be mined, a tool to be used, or a stepping stone for someone else's gain. You are a sovereign being, worthy of a love that sees you, honors you, and walks beside you in the fullness of who you are. Demand nothing less, and if he can't meet you there, have the courage to walk away. Your future, your growth, your peace, they're worth it.